Angry bartender attacks autistic woman, but her boyfriend came and did this. The bar was alive with noise, a mix of laughter, clinking glasses and music blaring from the speakers. Daniel held the door open for Lily, who hesitated at the threshold, her hand gripping the strap of her bag tightly. The cacophony of sounds hit her like a wave, and she took a deep breath to steady herself. "You okay?" Daniel asked, his voice soft and reassuring. Lily nodded, though her fingers fidgeted with the charm bracelet on her wrist, a coping mechanism she often used in unfamiliar or overwhelming situations. "It's just loud," she said quietly, her eyes darting around the room. "We don't have to stay long," Daniel said, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Let's just grab a drink and see how you feel." She gave him a small smile and stepped inside, her senses gradually adjusting to the chaotic atmosphere. They found a table near the back, away from the center of the action. Daniel went to the bar to order while Lily sat, her fingers still toying with her bracelet. At the counter, Daniel waited patiently as the bartender, Steve, moved sluggishly from one customer to the next. When Steve finally reached him, his expression was impatient. "What'll it be?" Steve asked, barely glancing up as he wiped the counter with a rag. "2 sodas, please," Daniel said, pulling out his wallet. Steve raised an eyebrow. "Sodas? This is a bar, not a kid's birthday party." Daniel forced a smile, trying to keep the interaction pleasant. "We're just here to relax." Steve shrugged and turned to grab the drinks. When he returned, he slid the glasses across the counter with a little too much force, causing one to slosh over the rim. "There. $6. Daniel handed over a 10 and waited for the change, but Steve had already moved on to the next customer. Daniel sighed, deciding it wasn't worth the trouble, and returned to the table. Lily was tracing patterns on the condensation of the table with her finger when Daniel placed the drinks in front of her. "Here you go." "Thanks," she said, taking a cautious sip. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," Daniel replied, glancing back at the bar. "The bartender's just having a rough day, I guess." Lily nodded, her attention shifting back to her drink. She didn't notice the way Steve glanced their way from behind the counter, his expression unreadable. As the night wore on, the bar grew busier. The noise level climbed, and Lily began to feel the familiar tug of anxiety creeping in. She fidgeted more frequently, her bracelet jingling softly with each movement. Daniel noticed and leaned closer. "Do you want to leave?" he asked, concern etched on his face. Lily shook her head. "No, I'm okay. I just need a minute." Daniel nodded, giving her space while keeping a protective eye on her. He knew how much effort it took for her to push through moments like these, and he admired her for it. A few minutes later, Lily dropped her bracelet while reaching for her drink. It hit the floor with a soft clink and she bent down to retrieve it. As she fumbled to pick it up, Steve passed by, muttering just loud enough for her to hear, "Some people really need to learn how to act in public." Lily froze, her fingers curling around the bracelet. She straightened slowly, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. Daniel, who had caught the comment, turned to Steve with a sharp look. "Is there a problem?" Daniel asked, his tone measured but firm. Steve shrugged, a smirk tugging at his lips. "No problem. Just saying what everyone's thinking." Daniel's jaw tightened, but he didn't want to escalate things. He turned back to Lily, who was staring at her bracelet, her shoulders tense. "Hey," Daniel said gently, placing a hand on hers. "You okay?" She nodded, though her voice wavered as she said, "I'm fine." Daniel wasn't convinced, but he didn't push. Instead, he stayed close, his presence a quiet reassurance. The night took a darker turn when Lily, trying to order a glass of water, found herself face to face with Steve at the bar. She hesitated, her voice catching as she asked for the drink. "Spit it out," Steve said, leaning on the counter. "I don't have all night." Lily's cheeks turned pink and she stammered, "Just water, please." Steve rolled his eyes and poured the drink, slamming it on the counter with unnecessary force. The glass tipped slightly, spilling a few drops onto Lily's hand. She flinched but said nothing, her gaze fixed on the floor. "You're welcome," Steve said sarcastically, his voice loud enough for nearby customers to hear. A few heads turned and Lily's embarrassment deepened. Daniel, who had been watching from the table, was on his feet in an instant. He approached the bar, his expression calm but resolute. "What's your problem?" Daniel asked, his voice low. Steve scoffed. "No problem. Just don't appreciate people wasting my time." "She asked for a glass of water," Daniel said. "That's your job." "My job isn't to babysit people who can't handle themselves," Steve retorted, his gaze flicking dismissively to Lily. Daniel's fists clenched at his sides, but he forced himself to stay composed. "You owe her an apology." Steve laughed, the sound harsh and mocking. For what? Telling it like it is? The tension in the bar was palpable now, and more customers began to take notice. Lily stood frozen by the counter, her eyes wide and her hands trembling as she clutched her bracelet. Daniel stepped closer, his voice steady but firm. Apologize. Now. Trey Sanders wiped the sweat off his brow as the deafening roar of the crowd echoed through the arena. He had just nailed a buzzer beater, securing his team's place in the playoffs. The cameras flashed incessantly, capturing every second of his triumph. As his teammates hoisted him onto their shoulders, Trey grinned, soaking in the adoration. Yet even in this moment of glory, there was a faint, nagging emptiness in his chest. The celebrations felt hollow. Trey couldn't quite put his finger on it, but the high of the game faded faster these days, leaving behind a sense of longing he didn't understand. Later that night, while his teammates partied in an upscale nightclub, Trey slipped away to wander the quiet streets of the city. He loved basketball, but the constant buzz of fame often left him craving something simpler, something real. His feet carried him aimlessly until he found himself standing in front of a small bookstore. The warm light spilling from the windows beckoned him inside. Ellie Hart was sitting behind the counter, nose buried in a novel. The bell above the door jingled and she looked up, her brown eyes meeting Trey's. For a moment they simply stared at each other. Trey's towering frame and confident swagger made an immediate impression, while Ellie's quiet warmth and understated beauty caught him off guard. "Welcome," Ellie said, breaking the silence. Her voice was calm, even though she couldn't ignore the striking figure in front of her. "Can I help you find something?" Trey scanned the shelves, realizing he hadn't stepped into a bookstore in years. I'm not sure," he admitted, scratching the back of his neck. "What would you recommend?" Ellie's lips curved into a small smile. "That depends. Are you looking for something light and fun, or something that'll make you think?" Trey hesitated, then said, "Something that'll make me think." Ellie stood and moved toward a shelf near the back. Trey followed, noticing the way she moved with an easy confidence. She pulled out a worn paperback and handed it to him. "This is one of my favorites," she said. "It's about someone finding themselves in the middle of chaos." Trey glanced at the cover, intrigued. "Thanks. I'll take it." Ellie rang him up, her curiosity growing. She could tell he was someone important. His expensive sneakers and understated luxury watch hinted at wealth, but there was a humility in his demeanor that surprised her. "Enjoy the book," Ellie said as he left, watching him disappear into the night. Over the next week, Trey found himself thinking about Ellie more often than he cared to admit. There was something about her that stayed with him, a calm, genuine presence that contrasted sharply with the chaotic world he inhabited. On an impulse, he returned to the bookstore a few days later. Ellie was behind the counter again, this time sketching in a notebook. She looked up when the bell jingled and blinked in surprise. "You're back." "Yeah," Trey said, a sheepish grin tugging at his lips. "I finished the book." Ellie raised an eyebrow. "Already? Most people take weeks to get through that one." "I had some downtime," Trey said, though the truth was he'd stayed up late reading, unable to put it down. Ellie chuckled. "Well, did you like it?" "It was great," Trey said honestly. "Made me think about some stuff I'd been avoiding." Ellie nodded, her smile softening. "That's what good books do." Their conversation stretched on longer than either of them expected. Trey found himself telling Ellie about his life, how basketball had always been his dream, but the pressure of fame was starting to weigh on him. Ellie listened intently, occasionally asking thoughtful questions that made him reflect even more. In turn, Ellie shared bits of her own story. She had always loved books and art, but her passion had taken a backseat to helping her family. Running the bookstore gave her a sense of purpose, even if it wasn't the life she'd once imagined for herself. By the time Trey left, the sun had set, and the streetlights cast a warm glow on the sidewalk. Ellie watched him go, feeling a strange flutter in her chest. She couldn't remember the last time she'd felt so seen. Trey's visits to the bookstore became a regular occurrence. Each time he and Ellie grew closer, their conversations delving deeper into their hopes, fears, and dreams. Trey found solace in Ellie's grounded perspective, while Ellie began to see a side of Trey that the world didn't know, a man who craved authenticity and connection. But not everyone in Trey's life was as accepting of his newfound friendship. His teammates teased him mercilessly when they spotted a paparazzi photo of him leaving the bookstore. "Who's the girl?" one of them asked during practice, holding up his phone. "She doesn't look like your usual type." Trey shrugged, keeping his expression neutral. "She's a friend." "Friend?" another teammate said, smirking. "Come on, Sanders. Don't tell me you're settling down." Trey forced a laugh, but the words stung more than he expected. The judgment in their voices reminded him of the unspoken rules of his world, rules that left little room for someone like Ellie. That night, Trey lay awake, staring at the ceiling. His mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. He cared about Ellie, but he couldn't ignore the pressure to maintain his image. For the first time, he wondered if he had the strength to choose what truly mattered. As they walked down the quiet street, the hum of the bar fading behind them, Lily's steps grew steadier. She clutched the bracelet in her hand, turning it over and over as if grounding herself in its familiar texture. Daniel kept his arm around her, his presence a constant reassurance. "I didn't mean for tonight to be like this," she said softly, breaking the silence. "It's not your fault," Daniel replied, his voice gentle but firm. "Steve's behavior was inexcusable, and you didn't deserve any of it." Lily sighed, her gaze fixed on the pavement. "People like him, they don't understand. They see me fidgeting or struggling to speak, and they think I'm weird or difficult. They don't even try to understand." Daniel stopped walking and turned to face her. "And that's exactly why we can't let people like him win. You're not weird or difficult, Lily. You're amazing, and anyone who can't see that doesn't deserve to be part of your world." His words brought a small smile to her lips, though her eyes still glistened with unshed tears. "You're too good to me," she murmured. "No," Daniel said, brushing a strand of hair away from her face. "I'm just lucky to have you." They continued walking, the tension of the evening slowly giving way to a quiet sense of togetherness. As they reached a small park, Daniel suggested they sit for a while. Lily agreed, and they found a bench beneath a street lamp, the soft glow casting long shadows across the grass. The next morning, Daniel woke to the sound of his phone buzzing incessantly on the bedside table. Groggily, he picked it up and squinted at the screen. His heart skipped a beat when he saw dozens of notifications, texts, missed calls, and social media alerts. "What the?" he muttered, sitting up. Lily stirred beside him, her brow furrowing as she opened her eyes. "What's wrong?" she asked sleepily. "I'm not sure," Daniel said, scrolling through his phone. Then he saw it. A video of last night's confrontation at the bar, posted by one of the patrons who had recorded the incident. The video had gone viral overnight, with thousands of comments pouring in. "Is that us?" Lily asked, leaning over to see the screen. "Yeah," Daniel said, his voice tinged with disbelief. "It looks like someone recorded what happened." He played the video, the sound of Steve's taunts and Daniel's calm but firm defense filling the room. As the video ended, the comments caught his attention. Many were supportive, praising Daniel for standing up for Lily and condemning Steve's behavior. "This is a lot," Lily said, her voice wavering as she read through the comments. Daniel put his phone down and turned to her. "Are you okay? We can ignore it if it's too much." Lily shook her head, a mixture of emotions playing across her face. "No, it's good that people are talking about this. Maybe it'll help others understand." By midday, the video had reached the local news. Reporters began reaching out, wanting to hear Lily and Daniel's side of the story. While Daniel was hesitant at first, Lily surprised him by agreeing to speak. "I think it's important," she said, her voice steady despite her nerves. "If sharing my story can help even one person feel less alone, then it's worth it." Together, they sat for an interview with a local journalist. Lily spoke openly about her autism, the challenges she faced, and the support Daniel had always given her. She also shared her hopes for greater understanding and acceptance. "Everyone deserves kindness," Lily said, her gaze fixed on the camera. "It doesn't cost anything, and it can change someone's life." The interview struck a chord with viewers, and soon the story gained even more traction. Advocacy groups reached out to Lily, inviting her to speak at events and share her perspective. The bar where the incident occurred announced that Steve had been let go and pledged to implement sensitivity training for their staff. Lily and Daniel attended the first training session, where Lily shared her experiences with the employees. She was nervous at first, but as she spoke, she saw the impact her words had on the room. People listened, their expressions shifting from indifference to understanding. After the session, one of the bartenders approached her. "Thank you for sharing that," he said. "I never realized how much a small comment or action could hurt someone. I'm sorry for what you went through." Lily smiled, her heart swelling with a mix of pride and relief. "Thank you for listening," she replied. "That's all I could ever ask for." Later that evening, as Lily and Daniel sat on their couch, scrolling through the countless messages of support they had received, Lily turned to him with a thoughtful expression. "You know," she said, "I never thought something like this could happen. But maybe it was meant to. Maybe it's a chance to make things better." Daniel took her hand, his grip warm and reassuring. "I think you're right. And I'll be with you every step of the way." Lily smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder. For the first time in a long time she felt a sense of hope, a belief that the world could change one story at a time. Over the next few weeks, Lily's story continued to resonate with people across the country. Messages poured in from individuals who had experienced similar struggles, thanking her for her bravery and for giving a voice to those who often felt unseen. Each message filled her with a mix of emotions: gratitude, sadness, and determination. Daniel supported her every step of the way, helping her sort through emails and organize her schedule as invitations to speak at events began to roll in. At first, the thought of speaking in front of a crowd terrified Lily, but Daniel reassured her. "You've already done the hardest part," he told her one evening as they prepared for her first event. "You stood up and shared your story. Now you're just sharing it with more people." Lily nodded, clutching the speech she had written. "I just don't want to let anyone down." "You won't," Daniel said, his voice steady. "You're going to inspire them." The day of the event arrived and Lily found herself standing backstage, her heart pounding in her chest. The auditorium was packed with people, families, advocates, and individuals from all walks of life who had come to hear her speak. Daniel stood beside her, his hand resting lightly on her back. "You've got this," he whispered. When her name was announced, the audience erupted in applause. Lily took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage, the bright lights momentarily disorienting her. She adjusted the microphone and glanced out at the sea of faces, her nerves bubbling to the surface. But then she saw Daniel in the front row, his smile warm and encouraging. She focused on him as she began to speak. "My name is Lily and I'm autistic," she started, her voice trembling slightly. "For most of my life I felt like I didn't belong, like I was too different to be accepted. But what happened to me at that bar, it reminded me that being different doesn't mean being less." As she spoke, the trembling in her voice disappeared. She shared her experiences, her struggles, and her hopes for a more inclusive world. She talked about the importance of empathy, of taking the time to understand rather than judge. By the time she finished, the auditorium was silent. Then, as her final words hung in the air, the audience erupted into a standing ovation. Lily's cheeks flushed with emotion as tears welled in her eyes. She glanced at Daniel, who was clapping the loudest, his pride evident. In the days that followed, Lily's confidence grew. She began to embrace her role as an advocate, working with organizations to create resources for individuals on the spectrum and their families. She met others who shared their own stories, each one strengthening her resolve. One afternoon, while sitting in a cafe with Daniel, she received a message from the bar manager. It was a photo of a newly installed sign by the entrance, which read, "All are welcome here. Discrimination will not be tolerated." Below the sign was a short note. "Hi Lily. We wanted you to know that your story made a difference. We're committed to doing better and it's because of you. Thank you for inspiring change. The team at the bar *. Lily stared at the message, her hands trembling slightly as she passed the phone to Daniel. "Look," she said, her voice filled with emotion. Daniel read the message and grinned. "That's amazing, Lily. You did that?" "We did that," she corrected, leaning her head against his shoulder. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." As their journey continued, Lily and Daniel's bond only deepened. They faced challenges together, each one strengthening their love and commitment. And while the world wasn't perfect, they found comfort in knowing that their actions, however small, were making it better. One evening, as they sat on their balcony watching the sun set, Lily turned to Daniel with a thoughtful expression. "Do you think things will ever change?" she asked. Daniel took her hand, his gaze steady. "They already are. And with people like you leading the way, I have no doubt they'll keep getting better." Lily smiled, her heart full. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew she wasn't alone. Together they would continue to stand up, speak out, and fight for a world where everyone was seen, valued, and loved. As Lily's advocacy work grew, so did her network of supporters. Messages continued to pour in from people thanking her for sharing her story and for shining a light on the struggles faced by individuals on the spectrum. Many shared their own experiences of discrimination, and Lily read each one, often moved to tears. Daniel encouraged her to take breaks when the emotional weight of the stories became overwhelming. "You don't have to carry it all at once," he reminded her gently. "You're making a difference, but it's okay to take care of yourself too." Lily nodded, appreciating his understanding. "It's just, I see so much of myself in their stories. I don't want anyone else to feel the way I did. And because of you, fewer people will," Daniel said. "But remember, you're not alone in this." One evening, they attended a community event organized by a local autism advocacy group. The event featured a panel discussion, followed by an open mic session where attendees could share their experiences. Lily was nervous but determined to speak. When it was her turn, she stepped up to the microphone, her heart pounding. The room fell silent as she began. "I'm here tonight because of an experience I had, a painful one," she said, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "But that experience taught me something important. That silence allows discrimination to thrive. And that's why I'm standing here now. Because I refuse to be silent." She went on to talk about her journey, about Daniel's unwavering support, and about the power of empathy and understanding. Her words resonated deeply, and when she finished, the room erupted in applause. After the event, a young woman approached her. "Thank you for speaking," she said, her voice trembling. "I've never had the courage to share my story, but hearing you tonight, it gives me hope." Lily smiled, her eyes shining. "Your story matters," she said. "And when you're ready, the world needs to hear it." The momentum of Lily's work continued to grow. One day she received an email from a national advocacy organization, inviting her to join a campaign aimed at promoting inclusivity and understanding. The campaign included workshops, public service announcements, and collaborations with schools and businesses. Lily hesitated at first, feeling the familiar tug of self-doubt. "What if I'm not ready for something this big?" she asked Daniel. "You are," he said without hesitation. "You've already done so much. This is just the next step." With Daniel's encouragement, Lily accepted the invitation. The campaign became a turning point, giving her a platform to reach even more people. She traveled to schools, workplaces, and community centers, sharing her story and helping others understand the importance of acceptance. Meanwhile, the bar where the incident had occurred became a symbol of change. The staff embraced the new sensitivity training, and the manager reached out to Lily to keep her updated on their progress. Over time, the bar gained a reputation as a welcoming and inclusive space, attracting patrons who appreciated the shift. One afternoon, the manager invited Lily and Daniel back to the bar for a private meeting. Hesitant but curious, they agreed. When they arrived, the manager greeted them warmly. "I owe you both an apology," she said, her voice earnest. "What happened that night should never have happened, and I take full responsibility for not addressing it sooner." Lily nodded, her expression softening. "Thank you. It means a lot to hear that." The manager went on to explain the changes they had implemented, from staff training to new policies aimed at creating a more inclusive environment. "We couldn't have done this without you," she said. "Your story opened our eyes." Lily felt a surge of pride but also humility. "It wasn't just me," she said, glancing at Daniel. "It was all of us standing up and saying, 'This isn't okay.'" As they left the bar, Lily felt a sense of closure. The place that had once been the scene of pain and humiliation had transformed into a symbol of hope and progress. It was a reminder that change, no matter how difficult, was always possible. Lily's work continued to touch lives in ways she hadn't imagined. She started collaborating with educators to create programs that taught children about neurodiversity. These programs, which included interactive activities and personal stories, aimed to foster understanding and compassion from a young age. During one of these sessions at a local school, a young boy raised his hand. "My little sister is autistic," he said. "Sometimes she doesn't like hugs, but I thought that meant she didn't love me." Lily knelt to his level, her expression warm. "Your sister loves you in her own way," she said gently. "Sometimes people on the spectrum express their feelings differently, but it doesn't mean they care any less." The boy nodded, a small smile spreading across his face. After the session, his teacher approached Lily. "You've made such a difference," the teacher said. "I think you've helped these kids see the world through a kinder lens." Meanwhile, Daniel quietly continued to support Lily, proud of her courage and determination. He often found himself reflecting on how much she had grown since that fateful night at the bar. Her voice, once so hesitant, was now filled with conviction and purpose. One evening, as they were preparing dinner together, Lily paused, her gaze thoughtful. "Do you think I'm doing enough?" she asked, her voice soft. Daniel set down the knife he was holding and turned to her. "Lily, you've done more than enough. You've changed lives. Mine included." Lily smiled, her eyes glistening. "I just want to make sure no one ever feels the way I did that night." "And you're doing exactly that," Daniel said, pulling her into a hug. "One step at a time." The next chapter of Lily's journey came unexpectedly. A publishing company reached out, asking if she would consider writing a book about her experiences. The idea both excited and terrified her. "I've never written a book before," she admitted to Daniel. You've been telling your story all this time, he pointed out. This is just another way to share it. Encouraged by his confidence in her, Lily agreed. She poured her heart into the project, recounting not only her challenges but also the triumphs and lessons that had shaped her. The writing process was cathartic, allowing her to reflect on how far she had come. When the book was published, the response was overwhelming. Readers from all walks of life reached out, sharing how her story had inspired them. Some were parents of autistic children, grateful for her insights. Others were individuals who, like Lily, had faced discrimination and found solace in her words. As her platform grew, so did her opportunities. Lily was invited to speak at a national conference on diversity and inclusion. The event, attended by thousands, was the biggest stage she had ever faced. Standing backstage, she felt a familiar wave of nerves. "You've got this," Daniel said, squeezing her hand. Lily nodded, taking a deep breath. When her name was called, she stepped onto the stage to thunderous applause. She began her speech with the same words she had used that first night. "My name is Lily and I'm autistic." This time, her voice carried not just courage but a sense of pride. She shared her story with authenticity and passion, weaving in messages of hope and the importance of understanding. By the time she finished, the audience was on their feet, the applause echoing through the auditorium. Lily stood there, humbled and grateful, as she realized just how far she had come. Lily's work continued to touch lives in ways she hadn't imagined. She started collaborating with educators to create programs that taught children about neurodiversity. These programs, which included interactive activities and personal stories, aimed to foster understanding and compassion from a young age. During one of these sessions at a local school, a young boy raised his hand. "My little sister is autistic," he said. "Sometimes she doesn't like hugs, but I thought that meant she didn't love me." Lily knelt to his level, her expression warm. "Your sister loves you in her own way," she said gently. "Sometimes people on the spectrum express their feelings differently, but it doesn't mean they care any less." The boy nodded, a small smile spreading across his face. After the session, his teacher approached Lily. "You've made such a difference," the teacher said. "I think you've helped these kids see the world through a kinder lens." Meanwhile, Daniel quietly continued to support Lily, proud of her courage and determination. He often found himself reflecting on how much she had grown since that fateful night at the bar. Her voice, once so hesitant, was now filled with conviction and purpose. One evening, as they were preparing dinner together, Lily paused, her gaze thoughtful. "Do you think I'm doing enough?" she asked, her voice soft. Daniel set down the knife he was holding and turned to her. "Lily, you've done more than enough. You've changed lives. Mine included." Lily smiled, her eyes glistening. "I just want to make sure no one ever feels the way I did that night." "And you're doing exactly that," Daniel said, pulling her into a hug. "One step at a time." The next chapter of Lily's journey came unexpectedly. A publishing company reached out, asking if she would consider writing a book about her experiences. The idea both excited and terrified her. "I've never written a book before," she admitted to Daniel. "You've been telling your story all this time," he pointed out. "This is just another way to share it." Encouraged by his confidence in her, Lily agreed. She poured her heart into the project, recounting not only her challenges but also the triumphs and lessons that had shaped her. The writing process was cathartic, allowing her to reflect on how far she had come. When the book was published, the response was overwhelming. Readers from all walks of life reached out, sharing how her story had inspired them. Some were parents of autistic children, grateful for her insights. Others were individuals who, like Lily, had faced discrimination and found solace in her words. As her platform grew, so did her opportunities. Lily was invited to speak at a national conference on diversity and inclusion. The event, attended by thousands, was the biggest stage she had ever faced. Standing backstage, she felt a familiar wave of nerves. "You've got this," Daniel said, squeezing her hand. Lily nodded, taking a deep breath. When her name was called, she stepped onto the stage to thunderous applause. She began her speech with the same words she had used that first night. "My name is Lily and I'm autistic." This time, her voice carried not just courage but a sense of pride. She shared her story with authenticity and passion, weaving in messages of hope and the importance of understanding. By the time she finished, the audience was on their feet, the applause echoing through the auditorium. Lily stood there, humbled and grateful, as she realized just how far she had come. As the applause settled into a quiet hum, Lily stepped off the stage and was immediately greeted by a group of attendees waiting to speak with her. Among them was a young woman who introduced herself as Emma. She hesitated, glancing at the floor before finally meeting Lily's eyes. "I've never told anyone this, but I'm autistic too," Emma said softly. "Hearing you speak tonight, it made me feel like I'm not alone." Lily's heart swelled. She reached out and took Emma's hands gently. "You're never alone," Lily said. "Your story matters just as much as mine. And the fact that you're here tonight sharing this with me, that's incredibly brave." Emma smiled, her eyes glistening with tears. "Thank you for being so open. It gives me hope that one day I can do the same." Back at home, Lily reflected on the night with Daniel. They sat together on their balcony, the city lights twinkling in the distance. She was quiet for a while, her thoughts a mix of gratitude and determination. "Do you ever think about how all of this started?" she asked, her voice soft. "All the time," Daniel replied. "It's incredible to see how far you've come since that night." Lily nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "It's strange to think that something so painful could lead to something so meaningful." "It's not strange," Daniel said, his tone thoughtful. "It's because of you. You turned that experience into something powerful. You refused to let it define you." Lily leaned her head against his shoulder. "I couldn't have done it without you." Daniel wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. "You're stronger than you realize, Lily. I've just been here to remind you of that." In the following months, Lily continued to expand her reach. She launched an online platform where individuals on the spectrum could share their stories and connect with others. The platform quickly grew into a supportive community with forums, resources, and virtual meetups. One day, Lily received a message from a teacher in a small town. The teacher explained that she had used Lily's story as part of a lesson on empathy and inclusion. The students, many of whom had never interacted with someone on the spectrum, were deeply moved. "They told me they want to do better," the teacher wrote. "Your story has planted a seed of kindness in them." Lily shared the message with Daniel, her eyes shining. "This is why I do it," she said. "For moments like this. And there will be so many more," Daniel said with a smile. "You're changing the world, one story at a time." Despite her growing success, Lily remained grounded. She never forgot the support she had received along the way, especially from Daniel. To celebrate their journey, she organized a small gathering with their closest friends and family. During the gathering, Daniel surprised Lily with a toast. Standing in the warm glow of string lights, he held up his glass and spoke with heartfelt sincerity. "Lily, you've inspired so many people, but none more than me. Your strength, your kindness, your ability to turn pain into purpose. It's nothing short of extraordinary. I'm so proud of you and I can't wait to see what you'll accomplish next." Lily's cheeks flushed with emotion as everyone raised their glasses. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with gratitude. "For believing in me even when I didn't believe in myself." The months that followed were a whirlwind of activity for Lily. Her advocacy platform continued to grow, attracting not only individuals on the spectrum but also families, educators, and employers eager to learn and create a more inclusive world. She found herself busier than ever, but the work felt fulfilling in a way she had never imagined. One of the most memorable moments came when she was invited to meet with a group of policymakers who were drafting new legislation focused on workplace inclusivity for neurodivergent individuals. Lily's insights, drawn from her own experiences and those shared by her community, proved invaluable. During the meeting, one of the policymakers said, "Your voice is exactly what we've been missing in these conversations. Thank you for helping us see what really matters." Lily felt a surge of pride but remained humble. "I'm just grateful for the chance to contribute," she said. "There are so many people out there with stories like mine, and they deserve to be heard." At home, Daniel continued to be her rock. He managed the logistical side of her growing platform, handling scheduling, communications, and anything else that allowed Lily to focus on her advocacy work. Despite their busy lives, they always made time for each other, whether it was sharing a quiet dinner or taking evening walks through the park. One evening, as they walked hand in hand, Lily glanced at Daniel, her expression thoughtful. "Do you ever feel like this is too much?" she asked. "Like we're taking on more than we can handle?" Daniel shook his head, his gaze steady. "No, because we're doing it together. And as long as we have each other, I know we can handle anything." Lily smiled, her heart full. "You always know what to say." "It's a gift," Daniel said with a playful grin, earning a laugh from Lily. The next chapter of Lily's journey took her back to the bar where it all began. The manager had reached out, inviting her to speak at an event celebrating the bar's transformation into a more inclusive space. At first, Lily was hesitant. Returning to the place where she had faced so much pain felt daunting. But Daniel encouraged her. "You've turned that place into a symbol of change," he said. This is your chance to show how far you've come. On the day of the event, Lily stood outside the bar, her hands trembling slightly. Daniel squeezed her shoulder. "You've got this," he said. Lily nodded, drawing strength from his presence. As she stepped inside, she was greeted with warm applause from the crowd that had gathered. The once intimidating space now felt different, welcoming even. She spoke candidly about her journey, acknowledging the pain of that night but focusing on the progress that had come from it. "This place has shown me that change is possible," she said. "It's not always easy, but it's always worth it." The crowd erupted in applause and Lily felt a sense of closure. She had reclaimed the space that had once been a source of hurt, turning it into a beacon of hope. As they left the bar that evening, Lily and Daniel paused outside, the neon sign casting a soft glow around them. Lily turned to Daniel, her expression serene. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" Daniel asked, tilting his head. "For believing in me when I didn't believe in myself," Lily replied. "For standing by me even when things got hard. For everything." Daniel smiled, his love for her evident in his eyes. "You've done the same for me, Lily. Always." As they walked home together, Lily felt a profound sense of peace. The road ahead would undoubtedly have its challenges, but she knew she wasn't walking it alone. Together they would continue to push for a world where everyone was valued for who they were, a world where kindness and understanding reigned. In the months that followed, Lily's life continued to blossom. Her platform grew into a full-fledged organization dedicated to supporting neurodivergent individuals and their families. She hired a small but passionate team, including some of the people who had reached out to her after hearing her story. Together, they developed resources, hosted workshops, and advocated for systemic change in schools and workplaces. One of the organization's most significant achievements was the launch of a national campaign called See the Whole Picture. The campaign aimed to shift perceptions of neurodivergent individuals, celebrating their unique strengths and contributions. It featured powerful stories from people across the spectrum, with Lily's story as the centerpiece. One evening, after a particularly long day, Lily and Daniel sat together on their couch, sharing a quiet moment. The glow of the campaign's website lit up her laptop screen, and she scrolled through the countless testimonials and thank you messages. "This," Lily said, her voice filled with emotion. "This is why it was all worth it." Daniel wrapped an arm around her. "You've changed so many lives, Lily. Including mine." She leaned into him, a content smile on her face. "I couldn't have done any of it without you." Daniel shook his head. "You would have found your way. You're the strongest person I know." Lily laughed softly, the sound warm and genuine. "And you're the most stubborn." "Perfect team," Daniel said with a grin. A year later, Lily stood on another stage, this time accepting an award for her work in advancing inclusion and awareness. As she looked out at the crowd, she saw familiar faces: Daniel, her family, Emma, and others whose lives had intersected with hers in meaningful ways. "I never thought I'd be here," Lily began, her voice steady. "I never thought that sharing my story would lead to something so much bigger than me. But what I've learned is that when we speak up, when we refuse to stay silent, we create ripples of change. And those ripples can turn into waves." The audience erupted in applause and Lily took a deep breath, soaking in the moment. She felt a profound sense of gratitude, not just for the recognition but for the journey that had brought her here. Later that night, as she and Daniel walked home, Lily glanced up at the stars. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" she asked. "Sometimes," Daniel admitted. "But I wouldn't change a thing. Every step, every challenge led us here." Lily nodded, her heart full. "I wouldn't change a thing either." They walked in comfortable silence for a while before Daniel spoke again. "So, what's next for you, Lily Anderson?" She smiled, her eyes sparkling with determination. "Changing the world," she said simply. "One step at a time." As they disappeared into the night, hand in hand, Lily knew that her story was far from over. There were more challenges to face, more lives to touch, and more barriers to break. But she also knew that she wasn't walking this path alone. With Daniel by her side and the strength of her community behind her, she was ready for whatever came next. Together they were unstoppable.